I sat down to attempt the writing of this almost a dozen times. Many of those I wouldn't even write a word, it was just stuck in my brain. And maybe this happens to you. What I thought was a tidy story turned out to be anything but. Much like the pulling up of a weed that has grown too long in your garden, I mistook the glossy, egoic story of that time in my life, which I'd likely developed as a result of having to tell the 60-second tableside version over and over again, in which I kept a stiff upper lip and learned age-old lessons about business and such, for the much deeper one, the real one that intersected with other memories in a complicated system of roots in mycelial networks. I would need to dig up carefully if I wanted any kind of majority extrication. The story starts with what El Topo actually was. As much as any of us would like to believe that a creative endeavor ever really is our own, it's not. And neither was Topo. It was a collaboration between myself and a dear friend of many years. It was a solution to being abruptly jobless and with a 6-week-old baby at home. It was the answer to a prayer that I'd be able to do something creative and practical and get paid for it. And I had no idea what I was doing. Like a stranger that wanders into the middle of a movie, so the saying goes, I was out of my element. The food truck years taught me a lot of big lessons very quickly. Mainly they taught me about friendships and partnerships, about brand, positioning, vision. They also taught me to hustle, and I mean hustle. The first spring, on one stretch, I worked 15 days straight, sometimes more than 12 hours each day. The dirt and desperation and exhaustion were things that I'd never seen, especially not all paired together. And on top of that, the stakes were sky high. My living directly depended on how successful each shift was. Our friendship and business partnership couldn't take it, and we parted ways right before Hurricane Harvey hit. My home, garage commissary, and food truck were graciously spared any damage, but the lack of work found me with only $800 in my business bank account and all my catering canceled. Miraculously, my lone intrepid employee and I turned things around. Don't ask me how. Like many instances in the great swirling story of El Topo, it was some combination of the kindness of others and Deus Ex Machina that righted the ship. And somehow, by the end of the year, I'd taken on 2 more employees and won both the Butcher's Ball and Tacolandia. The next year was a blur, and by late 2019, I'd signed the lease on our brick and mortar with a healthy team of 4 employees and catering scheduled out for 6 months. A few weeks before my second child was born, we found an infestation of black mold in our home and had to move out, very pregnant wife and 4-year-old son in tow, pretty much overnight. My intrepid food truck crew continued to run the truck out of the garage of our mold house with me masked and stepping around the apocalyptic wreckage of my family's hasty evacuation. Shortly thereafter, and as a direct result of mold exposure, my wife went into labor early and emergently. I actually left a farmer's market shift to drive her to the hospital where our daughter was born via C-section at a whopping 5 pounds. She miraculously didn't even spend a night in the NICU, but my wife had to stay in the hospital for 2 weeks to recover from HELLP syndrome. I stayed with her, both as support and as her advocate, as she fought to recover and nurse our tiny daughter while our son stayed with my in-laws in a state of fear and bewilderment. Luckily, everyone made it out healthy, though not without trauma, and with my family somewhat settled at my in-laws' house nearby, I began putting together the restaurant. We opened, and a few months later, COVID hit. Maybe someday, and with some combination of psychedelics and hypnotherapy, I'll prize up and alchemize that time into a book of its very own. But suffice it to say here that it stretched me and everyone that cycled through my team to the point of breaking and beyond. But in that time, somewhere we found something deeper. Community, resolve, a better version of ourselves. All of that was great, but it didn't spare us from the grim financial realities of that epoch. It mortally wounded us. We struggled on until we couldn't, and I did the best I could to find the next move. El Topo ultimately was an idea. It was obviously inspired by the Jodorowsky movie of the same name, which conjured the proper aesthetic, weird, Western, lo-fi, and severe, and also a kind of mindset. It's a very East versus West thing, a casting off of the Western ego in the pursuit of breaking the cycle of samsara to find great uniting love, curiosity, and whimsy amidst the utter brutality of it all. It was accidentally perfectly named. Like the movie, El Topo, the restaurant surrogate of the Jodorowsky gunslinger, battled foes in the barren landscape of the Houston concrete jungle. Food truck bosses, restaurant critics, vastly wealthy and eccentric customers, the pandemic, music festivals, food purveyors, and for a brief time it seemed it had won. Somewhere along the way, it caught its stride. It rose higher and higher and managed a tiny peak above the clouds and just the slightest breath of something greater than itself. And that was enough. Maybe it was enlightenment, or just shy. Then, without the ability to reconcile itself to the world, without the ability to stay on the top of that high and crazy peak, it went the way of the phoenix and self-immolated. What I inadvertently built was more than I had ever hoped to build, and that is only evident in retrospect. It was something honest in a way in which I didn't think myself capable, something with a distinct personality that drew people in, customers, advocates, and disciples alike, something with a strength of spirit so salient that even a mere second-hand shard was enough to build a whole nother restaurant around. I gave El Topo everything I had, and so did many others. Many people gave until it absolutely hurt to keep this weird and delicate dream alive. Such is common with things of great art and beauty. I watched the radical power of it burn people up like an infinity stone, watched them go crazy with love and anger and frustration. I watched people get married, watched them walk out in the middle of a shift, watched them fight in the alley to first blood. Like some kind of team out of Star Wars, popping open a control panel and jump-starting equipment with hot wire leads was commonplace, and so too was celebration. We celebrated natural wine, good music, rare produce. We celebrated birthdays, holidays, graduations, and deaths. When Topo cooked its last service, I wasn't even there. For a while, it was something that I regretted. I had some macho idea that a captain goes down with his ship and felt like I didn't live up to that sacred duty. But again, in retrospect, I realized that I had already died 1,000 deaths for El Topo. I had shouldered the responsibility and the debt when others walked away. The weight of every bad service, the pressure of criticism, the late-night calls, and the grease and stink and horror of it all in my own home. The sacred duty that I fulfilled was not this noble one of valiantly dying on my schooner, or of hoisting the flag on some smoking battlefield with my last breath. Instead, it was shepherding my team through the bardo of death. The Tibetan Buddhists believe that death is akin to falling asleep. As a part of their practice, you work to attain lucidity in your dreams, which is also a way of preparing yourself to navigate the space your consciousness enters after death. This practice is beguiling to the Western mind as it is not a pursuit of some kind of traditional mastery or craft, but rather a kind of letting go of toxic habits and worldviews and a channeling of selfless love. In that way, El Topo was a kind of temple in which those that passed through it had the opportunity to heal themselves from the restaurant industry wounds and even beyond. We found and channeled a kind of collaboration, creativity, and loving hospitality that went so far as to be a home for some that had nothing like that, and for everyone, a liminal space to work and work on ourselves. El Topo is an idea. It landed on me like some delicate, generous butterfly at a very specific time in my life. Somehow, I managed to coax it into a brilliant flame for a while. It changed me and many others in significant and subtle ways. And then, like that, the butterfly moved on. When El Topo closed, I watched from my own cloud as so many of its disciples found their own way through the darkness that followed and smiled. Like the restaurants that I admire, I do not measure El Topo by its financial strength, nor even by the awards it garnered. Rather, I measure it by how much joy it created, how many singular dishes it produced and cataloged, how many people it trained and then gave space and agency to in order for them to move into their own power. I measure it by what it stood for and by what it inspired. Let the story go that there once stood a squat brick building that was home to a strange little restaurant that bristled at the term Tex-Mex, full of weird humans and weird art and weird food. A dish might run for a night or years. You might have a bottle of wine there that you'd never heard of before and would never have again, but that you'd always remember. You might not have been able to explain it to friends, but you got it. El Topo lives on in the people that ate its food and in the people that prepared and served it. It lives on in the kitchens of everyone with whom I shared our recipes. It lives on in relationships, in the hearts and minds of our family and friends. More than all of that, it lives on in the language of the arts that it pursued, food and hospitality.